Have you ever had one of those moments when everything just slows down? Like after a big event, I mean, maybe after it's landing the job that you've spent a whole career working towards, or finally getting that big promotion. Maybe it's the excitement of having a new relationship, and then that grows and you wind up getting married and buying home and having kids, and you're living the American dream. Or perhaps when it's you've saved enough to retire and life finally feels settled. It's those moments when this thing that you've been looking for this whole time is like, that's the thing. And once I get that thing, then everything else will be okay. And you get that thing. But then in the quiet moments when it's just you and the truth, a question surfaces. Is this it? You're supposed to feel fulfilled. You did everything right. But instead, there's this quiet emptiness, an existential thud that reminds you that what you thought would satisfy didn't. Today, we're talking about that moment when all of us who are paying attention feel, and not to bury it, not to run away from it, but to draw it out, to learn from it, because we are really good at burying that feeling, burying it under an avalanche of work or events, or numbing it through entertainment or substances. And we need to stop viewing that emptiness, that feeling of, is this it? Stop viewing it as a sign that we haven't done enough, that we haven't achieved enough or produced enough or performed enough, because that is not a problem to be solved, that feeling. It's an invitation to be answered. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Independence podcast. I am your host, Bryan Dunham, and today the topic or title of this episode is this it? The last 2 weeks, we've been covering a little bit of groundwork. 2 weeks ago, we talked about who God is, and that God is a being that is so different from us, so holy, which just means other, so powerful, that for you and I to sit around and show him our plans and ask him to get on our agenda is way out of order, just out of whack. And so we have to understand, we have to get on his agenda. And well, what is that agenda? And so then last week we talked about who are we in relation to God, and that God's agenda, first and foremost, is his own glory. And that is my first stop from a macro perspective. My first goal as his creation is to bring glory to him. But then from a micro perspective, like what is his specific will for your life and for my life? And so many times we search scripture and we pray and we ask other people, what does God want me to do as a vocation? Really, we think of it more as a career, that God has something specifically kind of hidden for us to discover and find, when really scripture bears it out over and over again that God is much more interested in who you are becoming than in what you do. That was last week. So this week, again, we're talking about that kind of existential moment when you look around and have achieved most of what you thought would bring you happiness or fulfillment or purpose or meaning. And it didn't. It just didn't. Not in the long run, maybe over the short term, but not in the long run. So today I thought I would begin with just a little bit about my own personal career journey, because I've walked this path. And my first real job was as a police officer in San Angelo, Texas. And I got that job when I was 20 and a half years old. In fact, the other guys that were in that academy with me made fun of me because I couldn't even buy my own gun. They would always say, oh, there's that guy with daddy's pistol. Or they'd say to me, hey, you got daddy's pistol with you today? And lots of fun. But I really loved the academy, and I loved coming out. I loved being a police officer. It's even to this day is probably the best job I've ever had. And the reason for that is you can look in the mirror at the end of your day and know that you did something today that impacted someone else's life for the better. And again, probably the greatest job I've had thus far, though I'm open to that changing in these years going forward in my life. But the problem with police work was how much money I was not making. And in fact, we worked 10-hour shifts So we worked 4 days on, and then we had 3 days off. And in every single one of my days off, I had an extra job. Sometimes it was working security at the local junior high school. Sometimes it was working security at a bar in the evening. Other times it was working DWI step enforcement. Step is specific traffic enforcement program. So just driving around um, looking for people that are potentially impaired, and I would get paid time and I have to do that. So even with all those jobs, I looked around one day, had gotten married and had twins, had a set of twins. Those twins are now 26 years old. But at the time, I looked around and thought, how am I ever going to make it? Meaning we were making ends meet, but that was really about it, even with all my jobs. How am I ever going to save for them to go to college? How am I ever going to save for my own retirement? I just didn't see how these things were going to happen. And so I began to look for other work. And while I was considering other work, I was having conversations with another officer. We had kind of an investment club of sorts where we would discuss investments we were making in the stock market and how things were going. And at this time, this was, 98, 99, when you could have, you know, written a few tech stocks down on a napkin and thrown a dart from 30 feet away. Whatever you hit was going to do well. Like you were properly diversified if you owned, Cisco and Microsoft. So this was a time period when I really thought, oh, I know what I'm doing. This is pretty easy. How hard would it be to take somebody's money and invest it in the market and have them do well? It seemed quite simple to me. Well, his father-in-law at the time was working for an investment firm, and he began to talk about that. And so I thought that sounds like a pretty good idea. And so I reached out to that same firm and met with a local financial advisor. And I don't remember much about that conversation, only this. He asked me, how much money did you make last year with all three of your jobs? And I told him $43,000. That's what I made, all jobs combined. And he said to me, I bonused more than you made last year. And I looked around his cushy office and thought, you know what? I could do this job, like bonused more than I made last year. And so thus I left the police force and began my work as a financial advisor, which actually went just fine for about a year and a half. And then 9/11 happened. And when those towers fell, the clients that I had really freaked out. Of course, as you would if you had money in the stock market and the market had to close that day because it was so wild and there was massive sell-offs and lots of money was lost. And I had been a financial advisor for a year and a half. Like I didn't know how to advise my clients through an event like this that was generational. So they all moved their investments to cash. I didn't stop them from doing that. I was terrified myself. When I have somebody's life savings in my hands, that was a responsibility that felt way too weighty for me at the time. And I wound up finding another job working for a mutual fund company. And so just to rewind the tape, I was a police officer in San Angelo, Texas for 6 years. And then I went to work for this financial services firm in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. And then I wound up getting hired at a mutual fund company in San Antonio, Texas. And I moved down to San Antonio. And the first couple of years of that job, to be honest, was just me getting back on my feet financially. I just needed a regular income, needed to replenish my savings. This particular company was a wonderful company. It had great benefits. It paid, a decent wage. It paid me about what I was making as a financial advisor, which wasn't great money yet, but it was enough to get by. But after a couple of years at this company, I thought, you know what, I can make a career out of this. And I was in an internal sales role, but my external sales partner and all the other external sales people at this company made incredible amounts of money. Like we were not open about our compensation. So people didn't know what other people made, but we heard rumors and we saw the lifestyles and we saw the cars they drove and the houses they lived in. It was very obvious that is where the money was made at this company. The problem was there was no pathway to go from the internal sales role that I was in to the external sales role. Not at the time. There is today, but there wasn't then. Because the company at the time was the cream of the crop when it came to mutual fund companies. And so they could take their pick when it was time, when a wholesaler would retire. And that was pretty much the only one of those jobs came open, was somebody had to die or retire or get promoted. And when that job opened up, the company could take their pick, even from local people that worked at other firms that did the same job, just worked for other mutual fund companies. They had their pick of the litter. So they weren't going to pick some internal sales guy who had no external sales experience. But I still made it my intention. I thought, you know what, I'm going to be the first. I don't see myself working for another mutual fund company. I am going to build my career to try to obtain that external sales role. And so as I thought about my skill set, as I thought about networking and everything I was doing, suddenly this became the focus of my life, was to obtain one of these sales roles. And so I did that internal sales role for about 4.5 years. And during that time is when I started to feel that kind of rat race of the same day looking like every other day, going into work. If you remember the old Dunkin' Donuts commercial many years ago, where the guy would roll out of bed and he would go, "Time to make the donuts." And then he would go off and do that. And every day was the same. That's what this job started to feel like. Like, some of the interactions were different, but every day it was the same thing and felt kind of like a grind, as I was really trying to build my skill set to someday be competitive for an external role. And during that time period, I really just began kind of living for the weekend, right? Parties with the other people that I worked with, football games, getting together with families, and you show up, you bring your wife, you bring your kids and a 12-pack of beer, and you show up to somebody's house at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. And what always happens, the kids run off to play together, the wives go talk together, and the guys all hang out in the garage and really just talk about stuff that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And was grinding it out on the sales desk. And then one day I got an interview. And to be fair, the company had created kind of this hybrid, well, not really hybrid role, and a tweener role between the sales desk and a full-blown external role. It was an external role. It was just dealing with a particular client, not all the clients we had access to. And so I got promoted, interviewed, got the job. I got promoted to the West Coast. And I was living in Southern California, and I covered 5 states out there. I covered California, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and Hawaii. And you talk about a dream territory as far as if you're going to travel. I mean, I get to travel to Phoenix. I get to travel to Salt Lake, San Francisco, Vegas, Reno, Honolulu. These were the main places I traveled to. And it was a role that if you could prove your chops, like if you could do well in that role, then you would get potentially a shot at one of the full-blown external sales roles I'd always had my eye on. So I jumped into this role with gusto. We moved to California. And as a result, because of the way the sales role was structured, and I was seeing advisors face-to-face in those 5 states, I was gone Monday through Thursday. I would fly out on a Monday morning. And most weeks I was driving to John Wayne Airport there in Orange County at 5 a.m. And many weeks I was driving there in tears. I didn't want to go. Initially the travel seemed exciting and fun, but it didn't take very long before even this became a grind. And it was like, yeah, I'm going to these awesome places, and I have this cool job that's really kind of a bridge, a stepping stone to get to the next real job. When I get that job, then things will be set, right? That was my mindset. But at the same time, leaving my wife every day on Monday and coming back Thursday night just to kind of be around her Friday evening, Saturday, and then Sunday evening. A lot of times I was just packing to leave again. I don't know how to describe it, but I hated it. I didn't want to go. And usually by the time I got to whatever location I was going to, I was able to switch over to work mode to kind of compartmentalize my life, which was encouraged, by the way, by the company to say, look, this is going to be very difficult on you. You need to compartmentalize your life. Like, when you're at work, you're at work. Don't think about all the other things. Focus on work. Use work as an escape to get away from these other feelings you might be having, which at the time seemed to make sense. When I talk about it now or say that out loud, it just feels like, well, that's kind of a twisted way to operate in your life. And after 2 years of this, after 2 years at that job, I was moved back to San Antonio. And eventually I was asked to interview for the job, right? That full-blown external sales role in Central and Southern Illinois. And I interviewed, I got the job. And it's like, wow, all this hard work that I've put in, all this effort I put in is now finally going to be worth it. And I moved my family to Springfield, Illinois. And I loved the recognition of being, I wasn't the first one, but of being one of the first internal salespeople to make that external sales role and to go from that internal to external. And I was good. I was really good at what I did. I traveled around, talked to financial advisors, did a lot of public speaking and presentations. And we lived in Springfield. We had an awesome house. We had some of the best neighbors in the world. The Biggs, Bob Biggs. I mean, you're not going to get a better neighbor than this guy. Wonderful people. And we found a church, Cherry Hills Baptist Church, wonderful church. We had wonderful friends. We led a small group. We had a marriage life group that we loved, helping to be a part of and helping to lead, and never had to balance the checkbook. Like if we wanted something, we just bought it. It was a different way of living for us. And from the outside looking in, I made it, man. I was definitely living the American dream plus. But inside, I was dying. I was drinking too much. I was not even sleeping in the same room as my wife. I had Friday night through Sunday morning was basically the break from work. Sunday afternoon, I started preparing for the coming week and just feeling that anxiety, knowing what was coming my way Monday, which was just, again, more of the same. And while the job was paying extraordinarily well, and it is a very good job with a great company, like there is no concept of what's enough, right? Because your sales goals always increase. If you've ever worked for a sales organization, of course, that's how it is. It's always, what have you done for me lately? And so you constantly feel like you are always striving for more, just a little more, just a little more, just a little more. And I had everything that was supposed to make me happy, was supposed to make me fulfilled. A beautiful wife, amazing kids, a great church, a job most people would dream about. And I was more lonely. Actually, maybe displaced is the better word. I felt more out of place than I'd ever been. And life had become just a string of successive weekends to escape the grind for a few hours. Another round of drinks, another Netflix splint, another Netflix binge, another football game, another night with friends who smile on the outside but seem to feel the same quiet ache on the inside. And sometimes a friend who did the same job that I did would call, and we would actually talk about it. What was wrong with us? That was a common thing in this conversation. We have all this, and yet I just want to quit. I just want to stop doing this. I want to find some sanity back in my life. And oftentimes there are actually two of my friends. I would be feeling this way, and I'd call one, and then he would be having a good week and kind of pump me up and tell me to hang on. And then the other one would be in a decent place. And then next week the roles would switch. I would be like, what was I thinking? I don't want to quit. This is an awesome job. And they would be calling me feeling that same way. And that felt like every week, like a weekly conversation, the highs and lows of searching for things in work and in life and in the bank account and in family and in all these things that I was looking for something that at times felt like it gave me a piece of it, right? Like a shadow or a glimmer of that thing, but never could fully deliver. And that question, is this it? Is this the way life is just going to be? Was a constant in my mind. Just another week, another year of striving for my territory sales targets that, by the way, again, never went down. Just an endless upward push where the only answer is just a little bit more. Some people I knew, they just settled into the comfort that their material success provided and called it God's blessing. That God has blessed me with ease and comfort. They might not put it that way, but might be easy to justify. Jesus said, I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. But that would be to confuse abundance with material prosperity, which of course Jesus was not talking about. My Christian friend, if you are listening, I think you would have a very difficult time defending the idea that following Jesus has anything to do with ease and comfort. So what exactly was the problem? Well, I was raised in a culture that said that the goal of life is to find yourself, to follow your dreams, to listen to your heart, chase what makes you happy. All looks great. All of that looks great on a coffee cup, but felt like the produce of trying to chase those things was destroying my life. Your life, the one listening to this right now, your life has to have an organizing principle, an organizing center. Just like our solar system revolves around the sun, right? Something is at the center of your life, and your whole life revolves around that thing. And you might say, well, Bryan, I have a lot of priorities. I've got my family, I've got my job, God, churches, all these things are very important. But the reality is that when push comes to shove and you have to decide between work or family or what God wants and what you want, God and work, there is a priority. One of those things will win out. You will choose something when pressed, and that something, that is your organizing principle. It is what your life revolves around. Something is your sun. So whatever that thing is, no matter how far you go, how much you gain, how deeply you search, it all circles back to that thing. And if that thing is not God, it cannot possibly bear the weight of what you are expecting it to deliver. And when you do that too long, that question, is this it, tends to come up. The real problem with success is that it feels like it's working, that it is fulfilling for a little while. It's like a car that is leaking oil. And you can do, like if you have a car that's leaking oil, you can just add a quart to get it back, to level, to full. But then guess what? Over time, if you continue to do that, that leak is not going to repair itself. It's going to get worse over time in all likelihood. And you're going to notice that you have to continue to add a little more oil than you were doing in the past and a little more frequently than what you were doing before. And this happens in our lives. When we look around and we realize there's a leak somewhere, we take the thing we think that we need and we add a little more. And that's kind of the first stop. It's like, I've pursued all these things my whole life. I guess what I just need is more. I need more of the job or more of what the job can provide. And when you go down that pathway and you start to realize, okay, more doesn't really work, then we choose different. Okay, well, then it's something just completely different that I need. On the outside, it looks like you've got the world by the tail, but inside, you're just trying to get enough to keep the car running, to keep, that treadmill running long enough. And these are the massive red flags. Whenever you think to yourself, I just need more, there must just be more, because I felt a little fulfilled there at one point. I need more of that, more promotion, more whatever, more influence, more money. And then the second red flag would be, I just need something different. I need a different job, different house, different car, different spouse. It's like some existential Dr. Seuss rhyme, right? It sounds good to our ears, but it holds no actual meaning. If you've ever felt that, is this it? You're not alone. We all chase something to make the emptiness go away. But what if that restlessness isn't something to be fixed? What if it's an invitation to something deeper? That feeling that way is a good place to be. Think of how Jesus begins the Beatitudes. This is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5. Jesus starts off with, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And I think a lot of times we look at that and we think the poor in spirit, like as though the Beatitudes were things that we need to shoot for. Like, I need to become poor in spirit, which I don't know how you might interpret that. Humble, perhaps somebody might think, well, that just means I need to be, less about me and more about other people. But while admirable, that approach, that is not what these words mean. The New Testament is originally written in Greek. And so when Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, that idea of poor, which is patokos, it's the root word, patokos, that word means deeply destitute. Like, not just destitute, which is bad in and of itself, but deeply destitute, like as destitute as you can be spiritually. Those are the people that are blessed. Blessed are the, Dallas Willard says, translate this as, blessed are the spiritually bankrupt, the spiritually needy. Those that say, is this it? The kingdom of heaven belongs to these people, according to Jesus. When you are feeling all that futility is actually when you are most close to the sacred, to the profound. That spiritual poverty, that deep awareness of lack is not the barrier to life. It's the doorway. The feeling of emptiness isn't evidence of God's absence, but is the invitation to encounter his sufficiency. Don't you think when so much of life, it's like cotton candy. Like, you see this thing out there and it's like, well, that's the thing I need. That's going to fill me up. That looks so good. It looks delicious. And you take that big old thing of cotton candy and you put a big chunk in your mouth, and what happens? It's gone. I mean, it disappears quickly. And that's how a lot of these pursuits, in fact, all of these pursuits in life can feel. It's like, well, it's going to be this thing, or it's going to be that thing that's going to give me my meaning and purpose. But it's like that cotton candy. You take a big chunk and you pop it in your mouth and it's gone. And shouldn't that feel like it's all one big setup? That it's supposed to be this way? That you are supposed to feel that there is something out there that will give you the thing you're looking for, fulfillment, purpose, like all these transcendent pieces, but that all the things that we think is going to give us that never quite do. Shouldn't that lead us to the deeper question of, then what is it? Is this it? That instead of running from or trying to bury that question, we should embrace it. So when we feel the weight of that emptiness, that is this it moment, when all of our efforts to fill the void fail, we're actually standing on sacred ground. The emptiness that we fear most is often the space where God intends to meet us most deeply. That is who this podcast is for. Those people that look around and have said and are saying now, is this it? Because you're my people. That's the question I've asked myself for a very long time. And that is what we're going to explore here until we run out of things to talk about. How total and utter spiritual dependence is the only true path to freedom. And if that is you, gosh, I would love to know it. I would encourage you. You can go to the website questionsgodasks.com, questionsgodasks.com. That is the website for my upcoming book coming out in December, but there's a contact form at the bottom of that website. Feel free to reach out to me and just say, I'm your people. I'm your people. Just put that in there. I'm your people. I'd love to know who you are. I would love to start pulling, even if it's a Zoom group together, a group of people who are on this same journey that I have been on. And I certainly don't have anything figured out, but I do know walking the road with like-minded individuals is where enlightenment can happen as we move together towards the same goal. All right. Is this it? Next week, we're going to have our first guest on the podcast. It is my good friend, Austin, and we're going to be talking about why it is so hard to release our grip on the illusion of self-sufficiency, even when we know it's an illusion. Thanks for taking the time. If you found this helpful, please share it with someone else. And until we get to speak again next week, grace and peace, my friends.